You are beautiful. That's why I can't like you. To you, there only existed a time of flowers. I want to call you Onni, you told me, holding my hand. Your hand was soft and warm. My hand was shapeless and rough like a tree trunk. Could you and I have had a relationship of sisterhood? You and I obviously belong to different worlds. I started to be jealous of everything you had. My hatred and animosity of and against you piled up in a way I couldn't control. I hoped and hoped that the shadow of ill fortune would approach you stealthily and riddle your life with holes. I heard a heavy object hit the wall at your place. A man's yelling followed after it. After some time, you burst into tears. At the moment I heard you cry, my heart started pounding wildly. Your cry through the wall made me imagine you sitting down on your knees in front of me. The more the man screamed and the louder you cried, the more excited and pleased I became. After going through all that turmoil, what you brought to me was a box of sea squirt. You visited frequently after that, bringing sea squirt with you. You said you felt like you wanted to live when you ate sea squirt. Even so, I couldn't help that the more I thought you were unhappy, the happier and more energized I felt. My words made your suicide an undeniable truth. I could have said, I saw the man push your back. However, I didn't want him to be punished. She used to sit on the handrail often. No matter how much I told her it was dangerous, she didn't listen to me. After you died, your unhappiness disappeared, and the energy of my life was gone as well. My life disappeared with you. One death led to another. Perhaps it was me who pushed you, not the man. I'm dying. Are you satisfied now? Aftertaste of Sea Squirt, written by Cheon Un-yeong. You are beautiful. That's why I can't like you. When I see your face, I feel a surge of anger. Your face looks as if sadness has never invaded it even once. That unchanging, smiling face of yours arouses certain animosity from me. To you, there only existed a time of flowers. You didn't know the process of falling leaves and forming fruits to become seeds. You were a flower in full bloom, a flower that bloomed in full with only bare, hardly recognizable movements. Only with a slight twist of your shoulders or a faint smile showing your dimples did you turn into a full-bloomed flower. You were the woman who only knew how to be happy. Your face always held warm, gentle expressions, never a dark shadow. You didn't grow agitated regardless of the kind of insults you were given. You were ready to change even the insults thrown at you into a different, less harsh language. You showed up in front of me with a small fish tank. The moment I saw you, I felt oppressed by your lively energy. The sound of your tapping shoes walking through the hallway ran into my heart. With your every step, your fluffy skirt fluttered around your knees. The man standing next to you put his hand lightly on your shoulder as if he was handling fragile glass. I was just coming out of my door, holding a trash bag. I looked at you walking towards me and stood staring blankly, holding the trash bag in the hallway. When you passed by, the side of the trash bag just popped open and the trash fell out. It smelled sour, a combination of rotten onions from the refrigerator and old kimchi. The man passed by, avoiding the trash, but you stopped in front of me and spoke. I moved in today. You live next to me. Your voice seemed lively and pleasant. I looked up at you as I squatted down in front of the trash. You were smiling brightly, standing against the sunlight. I felt like you were jeering at me with your bright smile. You greeted me gladly every time you ran into me, But your bright, carefree voice displeased me instead. I always ignored your greetings. Even though I turned my head when I passed by and ignored your greeting and disregarded you, you didn't mind. When I bumped into you while carrying a heavy load of things, you helped me, reaching as if to take them from me. Your kindness wasn't just limited to me. You greeted everyone around you with a bow, as if thanking your surroundings. You even sent grateful gazes to indifferent trees or bus signs. The kinder you were, the more animosity nestling inside me wildly grew a life of its own. It started dominating my body, silent yet strong, like a pulse. It was not something I could control with my own will. I make my living from flowers. To be precise, I create flowers for traditional weddings made of dried squid. I've done this work since I turned 30, over 7 years ago. I spend all day staying home, handling, cutting, and bending the dried squid. There's not a single day I live without the salty dried squid smell in my hands. I've been proud of my flowers until you showed up. I make the tree trunk and branches and then a whole tree of cherry blossoms by fixing the petals one by one on the tip of each branch with a whole body of dried squid. When I place a stamen made from one of the tiny suction cups from the squid's tentacles onto the flower, it is complete. You saw the cherry blossom stamen made from the sucker of the squid and clapped your hands, saying that it was brilliant. I was, in fact, a little flattered by your compliment. However, that elation disappeared the moment the tip of your finger lightly touched my flower. As your long white finger touched it, the dried squid flower seemed to gain liveliness. Blood seemed to permeate through it as a pulse spread from your hand. Even the white powder on the squid's surface gleamed incandescently, like the powdery scales brushed off a butterfly's wings as it briefly lights before flying away. I pushed you with my elbow, distancing you from the flower. And I never let you touch my flowers again. I knew, no matter how elaborate and beautiful the flowers I made were, they were no more than squid that couldn't bear the fragrance of flowers. The squid were only imitations. You assured me of that fact by touching my flower. I want to call you Onni, you told me, holding my hand. I immediately jerked my hand back and hid it in my pocket. I felt like I let you touch something you shouldn't have touched, something ugly and filthy. Your hand was soft and warm. Your pink nails were well trimmed, without a single hangnail. My hand was shapeless and rough like a tree trunk. Can I call you Onni? You asked again, drawing my hand back and holding it. I felt like the word Onni was a thing from a different world, not suitable for me. You nagged me with your twinkling eyes, so like a small child. I didn't answer. You had a habit of twisting your hair with your fingers. Even the hair you rolled and unrolled with your fingers looked like fresh leaves to me. Your shoulder blades, revealed whenever you pulled your long hair back, were round and sleek. When you tied up your hair, your beautiful neckline was exposed. I used to feel my neck stiffen when I saw your thin neckline. It stimulated a person's protective instinct. Since I was 20, I have never changed my bob hairstyle that slightly hides my ears. My hair was too voluminous and thick to perm. Even with my hair a little longer, I couldn't stand it, as it made my short neck appear to be pulled into my body. Once a month, I had my hair cut at my favorite salon where there's someone who knew how to handle my swallow-tailed hairline. When I was with you, I felt old, shabby, and petty. When I was walking on the streets with you, men turned around looking at you. You were proud of the eyes that followed you. No one paid attention to me. I got nervous when someone looked at me for too long. I was sure they would think my face looked like a turtle's. That person would imagine the eyes and scales of a reptile as my face. I never raise my face even when I'm walking on the streets. I walk swiftly, with my eyes down, as if unwilling to interact with anyone or anything in the world. Could you and I, such as I am, have had a relationship of sisterhood? You and I obviously belong to different worlds. I started to be jealous of everything you had. All those things, your laughter, walk, and kindness, were unbearable agony to me. My hatred and animosity of and against you piled up in a way I couldn't control. I prayed towards your wall that your happiness would become broken. I hoped and hoped that the shadow of ill fortune would approach you stealthily and riddle your life with holes. I heard a heavy object hit the wall at your place. A man's yelling followed after it. My body shivered from a certain threatening premonition. I stuck my ear to the wall and concentrated my attention like a hunter in order to catch every single sound. The man screamed, breaking things. Your loud groan sounded like a scream. I heard the sound of breaking glass and breaking wood. I didn't hear your voice. Only the occasional groan affirmed your existence. The man became more agitated and violent. His scream, though muffled, vibrated the wall. After some time, you burst into tears. At the moment I heard you cry, my heart started pounding wildly. Your cry through the wall made me imagine you sitting down on your knees in front of me. As I thought of your servile appearance, some feelings akin to triumph rose inside me. The more the man screamed and the louder you cried, the more excited and pleased I became. Once you started crying, the man's voice started to decrease little by little. His agitation eased dramatically, as if he did all that to instigate your tears. I heard something hit the wall and break, and subsequently, I heard the door close. It slammed so hard that the walls of my house shook. Following the sound of the door, the man's rough steps passed by in the hallway. I assumed the thing that hit the wall was your fish tank. After the man left, you stopped crying, and I heard nothing more. There was neither the sound of sweeping broken glass nor your presence. I wanted to hear more of your cry, and I waited, gripping the wall in anticipation. The sound of your cry had roused an unknown energy in me. The energy swarming inside me kept encouraging me. I needed to do something, anything. I picked up a squid I had brushed aside earlier and started making a flower. Working with scissors, my hands felt exceptionally light. A pleasant smile overtook my face, and even the sick smell of squid was fragrant. The sound of your cry had brought some vibrancy to me. When I thought that my flowers would decorate someone else's wedding, my hands momentarily lost their grip, and I felt angry. But your cry, as I thought of your cry, my heart eased. Be happy as much as you can. I poured the blessing over for the bride and groom who would sit in front of the flowers I made. I was making cherry blossoms and stayed excited for quite a while. I was about to fix the stamen to the cherry blossom when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door, holding the scissors in my hand. It was you. I blushed as if I was caught in the middle of eating stolen food. You were standing in the doorway with your usual smile. Your face was neat, as if nothing had happened, and showed no evidence of the previous commotion. Your dress and hair weren't disheveled, and your face didn't show a single scratch. I automatically tightened my hand around the scissors. I had to control the malice in my heart. I felt completely duped, and I felt like my blood was being drained out of my body. I wanted to cut out your contemptible face with scissors. Snip, snip. I realized I wanted to make a different flower from your face, cutting and folding your face with my hands. I should cut out your soft, glowing face and make it like a hard, smelly squid flower. The hand holding the scissors started to shake. I wanted to run to your house right at that minute and see the evidence of your unhappiness. But all I could do was to bite my lips and glance back at your wall. You held out a styrofoam box to me. I received it in bewilderment, just staring at your face, still lost in my thoughts. You stood there a little longer, hesitating, and returned to your house after saying goodbye. Even after the door closed, I couldn't collect myself because of the sweet smell you left. I smelled the sea from the styrofoam box you gave me. I cut the strings and opened the lid. After going through all that turmoil, what you brought to me was a box of sea squirt, a good 4.5 pounds. I glared at the wall with angry eyes. You were laughing at me. You knew I had overheard you, and you were acting on purpose. My eyes became sore from glaring. The scream and cry I heard might have been a lie. At the moment I was about to throw the box against the wall, the doorbell rang again. I swung the door open wide. You said you would trim the sea squirt for me. You even had a small bottle of spicy red pepper sauce in your hand this time. I meekly showed you in. The reason I let you in was to assure myself of your unhappiness. I wanted to check, as I was close to you, for the traces of tears and unhappiness. I peeped at you at times, but you let me down. You were stable. You turned around and started trimming the sea squirt in my kitchen as I anxiously paced behind your back. You didn't rush, but skillfully peeled the sea squirt skin without a word. As you picked one of the 2 bumps and put the scissors in, the black mud came out. You washed the nipple-shaped bumps clean and kept them separate. You wiped the mud with your fingers and then washed them, gently shaking them in a small amount of water to keep the natural scent of sea squirt. Compared to the bumpy skin of the sea squirt, how tender and soft its flesh was, and how delicate your fingers looked, handling its meat. I unconsciously approached your side and started falling in with the movement of your fingers. I could almost feel your touch on my body at one point, as if the sea squirt flesh you were pushing was my own flesh. And I was breathing hard, following your finger movements, twisting my body. I felt itchy and bemused. My house was filled with the refreshing smell of sea squirt instead of the salty stink of dried squid. I was losing consciousness from your scent and the sea squirt's tangy smell. The smell of sea squirt seemed to numb my animosity toward you. I put out a colander and handed you a plate. My mouth watered. You and I sat across from each other, putting the sea squirt in the middle. You just looked at the sea squirt dish for a while, as if celebrating some kind of ritual. Only heavy, awkward silence floated around you, me, and the sea squirt. At last, you started to eat. You would put the sea squirt in your mouth, holding it there for quite a while, before drinking a small amount of water. A small wave rippled across your face as you swallowed. When you crunched on the sea squirt bumps, I could almost hear the sound of a wild wave hitting a rock. Just watching your face, the whole sea came into my mouth. I took a bite of the sea squirt. The sour flavor spread through my nostrils and down my throat. I also swallowed the sea squirt and drank water as you did. The tangy, sour taste washed off and the sweet taste remained, almost as if I had received the tongue of a lover in a passionate kiss. I was soon falling into the soft flesh of the sea squirt. I feel like I want to live when I eat sea squirt. I feel like I want to live really well. You suddenly raised your head and said, looking at me. And then you filled up your mouth with the sea squirt, looking at me as if nothing had happened. I could feel the faint tears in your voice. Sadness brushed your eyelids. A burning lump was pumping up from the bottom of my body. I wanted to stroke your back for just a little while, but I only ate the sea squirt without a word. You also didn't speak anymore. You quietly put the sea squirt meat in your mouth and drank water. You and I ate until the plate was empty and the tips of our tongues tingled. You visited frequently after that, bringing sea squirt with you. The disturbing fights at your house became as frequent as your visits. The fights were becoming more intense. Something was always breaking, and then the man's scream and your cry followed. Whenever I heard the sound of your fights, I stopped what I was doing and stuck my ear to your side of the wall. After the fight was over, you brought the sea squirt, and came to me without skipping a beat. I sometimes found bruises on your arm or leg. Even though you had bruises on your body and were becoming thinner, you were always cheerful and kind. When I opened the door to your dazzling face, I felt you were wearing a mask, and I wanted to caress you. But a moment later, I was angry again. It seemed no amount of ill fortune could make you surrender. I was torn between compassion and animosity. Even so, I couldn't help that the more I thought you were unhappy, the happier and more energized I felt. You brought the sea squirt to me, but you didn't complain about the bruises on your body or the noisy fights. I insinuated I knew, pointing at your bruises, but still you quietly peeled the sea squirt skin or just ate. Then you started talking about your hometown as if the thought had just occurred to you. You seemed to belong to the past, not the present. You were from the southern region. It was a place so far away. You had to take the Jola line, get off at the last stop, and go about an hour more by bus. Your house was located at the foot of a mountain behind the bus garage. It was closer to a hill than a mountain, and was rarely visited by people because it was densely filled with camellia, Neolithia sericea, and silver magnolia. You said your house was patched with wood boards and was dark and damp, covered by the shadows of trees. You said you lived there with an old woman. You began living there when you were about 6 or 7 years old. You arrived at a Buddhist temple, dragged by your mother's hand. It was a small, old temple standing beside a cliff. While you were distracted, looking at a rock cracked like a turtle's back, your mother disappeared. From the moment you put on a new dress and went onto the train, you considered that your mother might be about to abandon you. You walked back alone down the road that you and your mother had traveled to the bus garage. You stood all the time so your dress would not get dirty. When darkness descended on every corner of that deserted place, you burst into tears. At the moment you started crying, an old woman slowly walked toward you and held out her hand. An old person looked like a mountain or a huge tree to you. You stopped crying and saw a tree. When the thick, rough hands held yours, you felt like she had been waiting for you for a long time. You held her hand and went up to the mountain, pushing your way through the camellia forest. And since then, you've lived there with the old woman. That mountain was a rolling terrain, a giant being, breathing, aching, and feeling sad. You used to follow the track of a slug or sit on a rock and count the numbers of buoy connected in dots across the sea, in the bosom of it. When everyone was longing for spring, your hometown bloomed with camellia all over. The camellia trees dropped their flowers over your roof and over the clay sauce jars. Every time you saw the red flowers, you thought of the red dress you were wearing when you arrived. And then you felt like leaving there so badly. You wandered around, stepping on the camellia flowers in the forest until late at night. One night, you were fiddling with a snakeskin that was cast under the shadow of a camellia tree, and all of a sudden, you left home. You walked and walked out of your damp, isolated life as far as you could go, farther and farther away. On the rock where you used to sit and look out over the sea, perhaps only the skin of small, colorful snakes slept in the sunlight. Now, you weren't even allowed to go out. The man monitored and checked up on your life constantly. Even when you came to my house to eat the sea squirt, you didn't let your cordless phone leave your hand so you could answer the man's call. He sometimes held your long hair, came out into the hallway, and made a fuss. He dragged you out in your underwear. Your long mass of hair was carelessly tangled and pulled, yet I still didn't go out and stop the man. I just watched him hit you through the peephole on my door. I tacitly supported his attacks on you and dreamed that his kicks became a little rougher, your cry a little louder. When I started hearing the sound of a fight from your house, the taste of sea squirt filled my mouth without fail. Like Pavlov's dogs, my mouth watered as I heard the sounds of violence through the wall. Like the aftertaste of sea squirt, my appetite only arose when I heard you being hit or crying. Now I felt like I couldn't live without the sound of your cry beyond my walls. Waiting for the sound impatiently, I indulged in the feeling of clandestine pleasure with heated anxiety. You believed that love was your body's reaction to another person's body, and that as long as your body reacted to the man, you could endure his violence. You believed you loved that much. You said that he also loved you. You didn't know it would never stop. His insane desire to possess you would stop only after consuming your entire body. I thought that perhaps you were also addicted to his kicks, as he was addicted to your pain, and I to your unhappiness. I've run into the man when we left your house after a fight. His face didn't lose its agitation. It wasn't unfamiliar. I looked at his face as if looking at my own. His face didn't show a sign of shame or regret. He looked lively and satisfied, and I shot him an indifferent yet covert smile. He passed by me, ignoring it. We became accomplices, exchanging short glances. As I recognized how he felt, he would also have felt what was sitting inside my heart. The man shared the same blood as me, like patients who suffer from the same disease, or siblings. You used to stand by the handrail in the hallway and looked down endlessly. I thought you were bewitched by something. But you often went to the handrail as if you were delirious, and then you kept looking down persistently. Even though the wind flowed mercilessly from outside, you would stand there for a long time in the cold wind. I found out later that what you were looking at was a camellia tree. Isn't it great to have a camellia tree in our apartment garden, Unni? I found out about it one time after you dragged me by my hand and showed the tree to me. The camellia tree in the garden wasn't too healthy. It was a pitiful tree, not able to bloom flowers like the baby apple trees, lilac, or magnolia in their season, or even abundant leaves like hornbeam or cherry blossom. The tree had blossoming flowers but soon dropped them, frozen after a few cold days. Still, you didn't feel it enough to crane your neck out, hanging onto the guardrail, and chose to sit on the railing to look at the camellia tree. You blushed as you looked at the camellia tree. When I saw your face blushing orange like the flesh of a sea squirt, I often became anxious. Did you want to go back and inhabit the skin you once cast over the rock? I worried you would escape from the man and return to your hometown. You had to stay here and share your life-giving energy to me. Now I couldn't stand your happy face even more. I couldn't motivate myself with anything but your unhappiness. It had to go on. I was cutting flowers while barely listening to the weekend TV show. Since the wedding season had started, I was stuck with the squid. My eyes were sore from placing small petals on the branches. It was then that I heard something like plates crashing down from your place, clearly signaling the beginning of a fight. I immediately turned off my TV and stuck my ear to the wall. But that was it. I heard the man's high-pitched voice, but I didn't hear your cry. I waited for a fight to set in, cheering the man. My body was ready to be satiated by your unhappiness, and I smacked my lips in preparation. But however long I waited, I didn't hear your cry. Instead, there was an odd silence beyond the walls. I only heard regular noise through the walls, a washing machine running from some other house or water running. I stuck my body closer to the wall and gave it careful attention. I closed my eyes tightly in order to catch even the slightest sound from the other side of the wall. While I was paying all my attention to the wall, there was a knock at the door. The knocking sound bore a certain kind of desperation. I intuitively knew it was you, but I didn't open my door. I checked my lock and was relieved. You had to go back to the battlefield. You could only come to me after the fight was over. Come on, get hit, fall, be kicked, and cry. Then I'll open the door for you. I supported you in my mind. Your sudden appearance was an embarrassment. I was as flustered as a boy who comes face to face with a woman to whose dirty picture he masturbated. My excited body went flat in a second. I couldn't stop with this frustration because the fight hadn't reached its climax. Since it was already started, it had to be finished. You knocked several more times, but I never opened the door for you. I looked through the peephole. You were still hanging around in front of my door. You were in light sleepwear. Your flower print skirt fluttered lightly, then went down. You stood there a little longer, and then went up to the handrail. You looked down again as if looking for something. I could only see your back. It seemed to tell me something. I saw the man approaching you. You didn't seem aware of him. I didn't miss the flash instantly reflected in the man's eyes. He reached his hands toward you, but at the moment his hands touched your back, you were gone. The man, as if he couldn't believe your fall, looked at his own hands. It wasn't clear whether his hands touched you first or your body left the handrail first. The man sunk down on the spot. I looked out at him with a mixture of surprise and terror. Watching you vanish through the concave lens was surreal. I took a long breath that sounded like a sigh. I felt as if something cold swept across my back, and I heard someone call me quietly. It was a low sound, reaching out to me from afar. I thought it could have been you. But I didn't do anything for you. I didn't respond to you, even at that last moment. It was the ultimate betrayal. I fell into a deep sleep, as if I were a person who had completed a premeditated murder. I saw that you were falling in my dreams. Once you left the handrail, there was nothing to stop you. Nothing blocked you until the nape of your neck first touched the ground, followed by your back and legs. Only your hands, raised abruptly after hitting the ground, broke the branches of the camellia tree. The camellia flowers covered your face, and you looked smeared. You fell like the petals, and your skin was slowly tinged in its vibrant color. While I was sleeping, your death became reality. The man ran downstairs, but you were already nothing but dead flesh, twitching to exhaust its last breath. In the meantime, your dead body induced screams, surrounded by people, before it was brought to the hospital, and I was dreaming of your unhappiness even in my sleep. How far can a person depend on one's own body? Who would have ever guessed that your beautiful face and small head would be smashed like a watermelon, dropped by accident? The pale girl on the autopsy table would be indiscreetly handled, cut, and dissembled. Your stomach would be taken out, the last food you ate exposed. Your mouth, that used to say hi in a lively voice, would be left open, your tongue sticking out like a dead bird. Your clear skin would later decompose in the soil. Your body was no longer a flower emitting a beautiful light. My body started to tremble. Did they fight often? A detective asked me. He asked me many other things, including what I heard that night and what relationship I had with you. However, I couldn't answer anything. Suddenly, a tremendous cold came over me. My legs quivered, and I was parched with thirst. Only then did I realize it was fact. You were dead. I told the detective that I didn't hear anything, because I went to bed early, and I added that you were suffering from severe depression. I muttered, telling him that you acted bizarrely sometimes, eating a massive amount of sea squirt, and that you said you wanted to die every time you did that. The detective nodded his head and wrote down something in his notes. He turned his head from the note and looked at me. He looked satisfied, as if he captured some appetizing prey. I started feeling encouraged by the expression on his face. She used to sit on the handrail often. No matter how much I told her it was dangerous, she didn't listen to me. My words made your suicide an undeniable truth. I could have said, I saw the man push your back. However, I didn't want him to be punished. Even if he really pushed your back, it was entirely your fault. It wasn't his intention to push your back. You caused all that. The stories about you were all over town. I could hear your story wherever people were gathered. Someone said that the man probably killed you and threw you down. The person who lived across from you said he saw the man push you. People also made the pretty plausible case that people who committed suicide under the influence of anger while having a fight wouldn't go outside the house, and that those people wouldn't open the entrance door, run to the hallway, and climb the handrail to kill themselves. On every such occasion, I thrust myself into their conversation and told them what I told the detective. It was clearly a suicide. The man was only trying to stop you, and when he touched you, it was after you had already left the handrail. People didn't doubt your suicide anymore. The more I talked about you, the more I started to believe in your suicide. It was clear. As your suicide became certain, people started talking about your behavior. She had the face of a temptress. That kind of face makes men go crazy. Men thought of you with dreamy eyes. The man from the dry cleaner shop even bragged that you tried to seduce him, giving him some drink or coffee whenever he brought your laundry back. Until then, he would have said you were a very kind and beautiful woman. You, as described by them, had seduced another man and were also in debt from gambling. The man became a hero who protected and took care of you. According to what people were talking about now, you were no longer a flower in full bloom, but a careless bloom that opened too soon or whenever it was touched. You were a street woman, mentioned mindlessly while they were smacking their lips. I talked about you constantly. People paid attention to what I said and looked at my face. I didn't put my head down now because of men's eyes. I was full of energy as I was when I heard you cry. Thankfully, you were still giving me energy even after you died. As time went by, people slowly forgot you. The town, once full of rumors, was filled with other stories. The grass ran wild over the sunken spot created by the impact from your fall, where you had stained it with your blood. Your house was left empty for a while, but now a new family had moved in. Instead of your cry, I heard the sound of children's heels stomping around and a dog barking. However, those sounds didn't give me any feeling. It was almost unbearable to live in the house without the sound of your cry. When I was in my house, all I heard was laughter. No matter how hard I tried to remember, I couldn't easily recall the sound of your cry. Only your bright laughter wafted around my ears. I couldn't stay at home in the end, and I wandered around outside. I looked at the spot you fell upon, hanging onto the guardrail, and looked for the camellia tree. When I found the tree, I broke its branch and shook the bottom part of the trunk as if it were you. To hear the sound of a cry, I knocked down children passing by or smacked their heads. The unbearable days kept going. Even though I tried to talk about your death, people didn't listen to me anymore. They now suspected that the man and I plotted to kill you. Some people even said that I went a little crazy, haunted by your spirit. People looked at me with contempt again. They couldn't look straight at me and looked at me sideways, as if looking at a reptile. And they started to avoid me when I showed up. I couldn't make flowers anymore. Squids were dried out completely and rolled around here and there, and the threads tangled all together. My skin lost moisture and became dry, covered with psoriasis. I became dull-handed and lost all vitality. I wasn't motivated by anything and missed your cry. The thrill, the energy your cry used to give me was no longer there. Instead, I was lost in a darkness worse than the monotony before you appeared. I tried to conjure the sound of your cry. No matter how hard I tried, you didn't come to me. I recalled the sea squirt we ate together such a long time before. I bought a box of sea squirt, walking around for quite a while at the fish market. As soon as I came back home, I poured the sea squirt in the kitchen sink and started to trim it. The sea squirt flesh was flabby. It was smaller than what you brought, and it wasn't red but brown. What you said about not eating it in summer because it becomes poisonous crossed my mind. Even if it was poisonous, I felt like I couldn't bear not eating it right away. I put the scissors in the small bumps I found, as you once did. I must have touched the wrong part because I made a mess with orange-colored juice, and mud burst out. It smelled differently from the scent of the sea squirt I ate with you. My hands handling the sea squirt were shaking like those of a person in withdrawal. I stuffed a whole uncut sea squirt into my mouth. I thought it might help me remember your cry by eating it. The nasty smell abruptly flooded my senses. I quickly swallowed it and had a sip of cold water, like you did. My mouth was filled with a sour taste, but the water didn't leave a sweet flavor at the end. Your face appeared before me briefly, like the sharp, sour taste. All that remained was the taste of the rotten sea squirt. I left my door as if led by a summons. Since I had been fasting for quite a while, I staggered. I was heading to the camellia tree. The camellia tree from afar looked just like a cross. Even though it was the middle of summer, I was deluded and thought flowers bloomed on it. The dark green leaves glittered in the sunlight. A few round, smooth fruits ripened between the leaves. I touched the round fruit. They felt cold on my fingertips. I promptly jerked my hand back, as if a metal blade had cut me. I flopped down under the camellia tree, but kept looking at it vacantly. The spot you landed on was full of grass. The power of flourishing grass was strong enough to completely cover any trace of you. I swept my hand through the grass. It felt as if I was feeling your warmth. I remembered your hand touching the squid flower. Would it be possible for you to share your liveliness with me in that moment? But you were nowhere. An ant hid in the shadow of the camellia tree. It was struggling to go into an ant hole, holding up a dead fly. Only the fly's body was left, its head lying somewhere forgotten. And I felt the same. I just stayed sitting there as I was until well into the night. I laid down under the camellia tree and stretched my body, thinking of the spot you lay down on for the last time. The grass was damp. I looked up at the sky with my mouth gaping. The houses with each window lit came into my view. The lights were close, as if I could reach them. Some of the lights were coming out of my house. Would it also have been the last light you saw? I closed my eyes tightly. The starlight shattered over my eyelids. Again, I headed to the camellia tree when it started getting dark, like a sleepwalker. I couldn't stop my own steps toward the tree. As I sat and kept looking at the tree, I felt like someone would come to me and greet me. It had been a year since you died. A cool wind blew from behind me and brushed my earlobes. Even had I turned around, there was nothing in front of my eyes. As I turned again, I found a camellia leaf stuck to my clothes. It settled quietly, as if putting its hand on my shoulder. I smelled the sea from it. You said you felt like you wanted to live when you ate sea squirt. I wanted to live too. But I couldn't live without you now. I couldn't have any vitality without your unhappiness. I was locked in a labyrinth. I would never be able to escape from the labyrinth in which you locked me. It was impossible as well to go back to my old life, in which you didn't exist. After you died, your unhappiness disappeared, and the energy of my life was gone as well. My life disappeared with you. One death led to another. I thought death was the completion of unhappiness. Would I have been different if you were a little more honest with me, or if your face had held less happiness? Would I have not needed to dream of your unhappiness? The jealousy squirming inside me was the truth I couldn't hide. Perhaps it was me who pushed you, not the man. I still head to the camellia tree today and wait for your cry, sitting in the shadow of the tree. I think I might have briefly seen a snake in red pattern hiding behind the tree. I grow dim. I'm dying. Are you satisfied now? Aftertaste of Squirt is a short story by Cheon Un-yeong published in her collection Majang-dong, published by Moonji Publishing Company. The English version is translated by Ali Huang and narrated for this audiobook by Thomas Craig. This audiobook was produced in 2021 with the support of the Literature Translation Institute of Korea.